So, looks like it's time. So, I'm Serge Wroclawski. I'm going to be speaking to you about MapRoulette and the work we've done and where we're going with the project. So, just as a show of hands, how many people here have used MapRoulette? So most of people in the audience have used MapRoulette. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the details, but let's see. So I'll go over what is MapRoulette, what's changed, because I think for some of you, you haven't used it recently. And then how can you get your challenges into MapRoulette, and we'll talk a little bit about the future of MapRoulette. So MapRoulette is a bit of sheep in wolf's clothing. The most boring definition I could come up with was MapRoulette is a geographic quality assurance tool based on VGI and the utilization of HIT and gamification principles in order to find and correct anomalies in the OpenStreetMap dataset. Really, MapRoulette is just a really fun game. So the problem we're trying to solve is correcting errors or anomalies in OpenStreetMap. And that process can be quite overwhelming. If you look at a rendering of the no-name database, it's just all red, right? This is pretty much all of Europe is bad. If we look at the OSM Inspector, we see something similar, right? You wouldn't know necessarily even where to begin. It's just too much. So how do we eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's the approach that MapRoulette takes. We take a very large problem like all of the names that have, all the roads that have no name or all of the errors of a certain type, and we say, just solve one problem. So an external program finds the anomalies. And those anomalies are each sent to MapRoulette as a task, which is just a unit of work. And then users are presented with that task, and they either solve it or they don't solve it. And then we give them something else to work on. And that's the simple workflow that we're committed to, which is just keeping everything really simple and easy. So I'm going to just do a quick walkthrough of how this might look. You get a challenge, let's say Waze needs smoothing. I'm sorry, I think there's a, yeah. So you see the error on the screen, you click edit, you go into your editor, this is ID, you could also use JAWSM. You see the error, it looks a little bit bumpy. You smooth it out, you hit save, and then that's it. And you go back to MapRoulette and say you've finished it, and it gives you another one. So as you can see, tasks are small. We don't try to solve lots of things at once, we just try to give users one thing to work on. Tasks are short. We're committed to no more than 5 minutes worth of work per task. Right? We don't want this to be an hour long or 2 hours long worth of work. It's just one simple thing. And within a challenge, all the tasks are the same. So if we ask you to do Waze smoothing, we're not going to ask you also to look at the speed limit or to look at nearby features. We just want one thing in a particular challenge. So you get into a nice smooth workflow. And really that's the key. So originally, MapRoulette was written as Remapatron by Martijn van Exel, who's in the audience, and he presented his work at State of the Map US 2012. It was a great success. He was able to find a ton of errors related to the license change and present those errors in a way that the users could help rebuild the database after some of the data was deleted. And in a very short time, I think just a matter of weeks, all of the data was fixed against the entire of OpenStreetMap. And that was amazing. And so when he presented in 2012, and he asked for help, I decided to see what I could do. So I looked at the code that Martijn had written, and it was great, but it was a little bit hard-coded. So it was designed specifically to do one task at a time. And I decided that we could make this a little more flexible. So I worked with him, and we've been working really hard over it took us about 1.5 years, but we really just wrote the entire thing from scratch. So we rewrote the back end in Flask, we rewrote the front end, first in something else, but now in React.js. We created a nice set of APIs between the client and the server to make that communication really smooth. We created administrative GUI, so to make challenge administration easier. And we've just been building on making the foundation for MapRoulette really easy and smooth. So Most of the work that we did on the relaunch was architectural, but we wanted to have some features that we would be able to showcase as part of this architectural change. So the biggest feature that we offered was multiple challenges. In the old version of the code, MapRoulette was working on one thing, and that was what the user was working on. Now we offer multiple challenges, so you have a choice of what type of task you want to work on. Tasks are grouped into these challenges. They're geographically bound if that's what the user wants. So we could say only tasks for Germany, only tasks from America, etc. And they have difficulty ratings, so tasks that are really aimed at new people versus tasks that are more advanced. The other big change is that we allow user-submittable challenges. So, in other words, if you create an idea for a challenge and you can implement it, you can send it to the MapRoulette API and present that to users. Another change that we made was we directly supported ID. The old version of the code didn't support ID. And we really focused on making the experience easy and fun, so we added a lot more help and a lot more walkthrough through the process. And as I mentioned earlier, we also created an administrative UI for challenge authors to allow them to have a little bit of a graphical version, a view of their challenge. And that's a little rough around the edges, but it didn't exist at all, so something is better than nothing. Some of the victories that this project has gone through is, I mentioned Remapatron, and that was a huge boon to the project because there was all this concern about license data, and the MapRoulette was not going to be, that OpenStreetMap wasn't going to be as useful, and just in a matter of weeks, that was all solved. Zoroways was another project, another challenge that Martijn created, and I think it was within 3 weeks, all the data was fixed, which is just outstanding, right? So I think there were thousands of these tasks, and in just a matter of weeks, the community just fixed them all. And within the relaunch, I think we started with 15,000 tasks, and a little embarrassing story is that in the original version of the code that Martijn and I wrote, we didn't have anything that addressed what would happen when there were no more tasks to work on. But we launched with 15,000 tasks, and I said to Martijn that this wasn't going to be an issue because I said it's going to take the community at least 3 weeks to fix all these tasks, and so let's not worry about it. Let's just, we'll fix that later in the interim period. And 5 days later, we were out of tasks. So this community, the OpenStreetMap community, has just been amazing in embracing MapRoulette and just fixing problems at an enormous rate. So it's really been great. So I want to talk a little bit about why MapRoulette works, why this project has been so successful. I think the biggest reason that MapRoulette is so successful is that most of the time, us hardcore mappers, we go out with a GPS, a phone, a notepad, a voice recorder, a camera, and that's a lot of commitment. We capture an enormous amount of very high quality data, but it's an enormous commitment to go and do all that packing and go all that collecting and then bring it home and digitize it. MapRoulette is not like that. MapRoulette is just a few minutes of commitment, and most people find that they can just do a few minutes of work, and they like the idea that they can pick it up and put it down, and there's no long-term commitments. Users talk to us about getting in the zone, right? They solve a few tasks, and they just keep going and going, and they're really happy. So we really find that the simple approach and the fun approach that we bring to the process is really the key of why this project is so successful. So how can you get your challenge, your problem into MapRoulette? Well, MapRoulette, has a very simple RESTful API that uses JSON. So you can just, with just a little bit of programming knowledge, put a challenge right into MapRoulette. We have an administrative GUI. Again, it needs a little work, but you can look at an overview of your challenge and see some of that data. If you really want to get into this, please come to Martijn's his workshop on Sunday. That's really where you can learn this process in depth. So what makes a good challenge? A task that needs a human intervention. If you could totally automate it, then it doesn't need a human being. But you should be looking for things that you're not 100% sure are wrong, but are probably wrong. there needs to be a right answer. If it's an issue where there could be this or could be that, and there's no way really to know, then it's really not a good challenge. And right now, you should be able to look at the existing data, maybe another data set, and the imagery, and be able to come up with that answer. If you need to be on the ground, MapRoulette is not currently a good tool for that. We're working toward that, but right now, you should just be able to look at the imagery and maybe an existing data set. And it should be easy to fix. If it's very complicated, then it's not a good challenge for MapRoulette. So the connectivity challenge in 2012 is a great example. So we had a lot of roads where we would have one road and then another road at a right angle, and the roads would be connected by a node. And in OpenStreetMap, we know that that means that the roads are not physically connected. Now, if you have, a road that's very close to another road, it's probably an error, and it probably should be connected, but it's not always wrong. And so we needed to make sure that a human being was looking at that data and making sure that really was what was going on. And so this was a perfect MapRoulette challenge. So how does data come into MapRoulette? And the previous speaker, Frederic, talked a little bit about how Osmo could in the future do this. We've been working with other data providers. So basically, you could diff or do some conflation with another data set and come up with potential tasks. The big thing that we've been doing is error and anomaly detection. So if something looks wrong, like let's say 2 ways that are on top of each other that are not connected, that are at the same level, or the connectivity error, or roads that are maybe have too steep an angle, etc. Those are generally error type anomalies. And we're also looking toward vandalism detection, and I think that was discussed earlier in the day. Ways that we can look for things that suddenly changed in a way that's not normally how things change, and that kind of thing would be a really good match for MapRoulette. So you can feed any of those data sources through our API, which is totally neutral to MapRoulette. So I want to talk a little bit about the life cycle of a challenge and a task. So you would query, if you're working on creating a new challenge, you would query OSM or this other external data set, and your program would go through the process of turning that into a MapRoulette task. Again, that'll be discussed in more depth in Martijn's workshop, but you would turn that into a MapRoulette task, that you would submit that task to MapRoulette, and then from your perspective, MapRoulette's somewhat of a black box. Users will get that task, they'll work on it, they'll decide whether they can fix it, or maybe it was a false positive in your query, or maybe it was fixed externally to MapRoulette. But our users will generally give you a result, and that's really the beauty here. Is as a challenge author, you can submit a task, and you get a result at the end. And as a user, it's really fun because you're just playing a game, and I think that's really the key to our project. Is it's easy for challenge authors, and it's fun for our users. So I want to talk a little bit about some of our past and current challenges. One of the more fun challenges that Martijn created was the Zorro ways. So ways that are like a Z, and that was often created because some of our older editors had some difficulty when you'd move the mouse a certain way. You might be moving a node in a way, and so everything would get messed up. And so we were able to fix that. Connectivity challenge, as I mentioned, was a really perfect challenge. One of the current ones we have are ways that need smoothing. So maybe you have something that's like a curve, but then a little spike, right? That's probably not right. It's probably just that there's not enough fidelity in that data. There was a challenge that came in with the relaunch where we were looking at one-way streets that were maybe pointing in opposite directions at a single point. And that might be because there's a lack of a turn restriction, or that could just be wrong, and one of those one-way streets is pointing in the wrong direction. We've just recently, in the last few weeks, the Italian community has contributed to OpenStreetMap, and they have contributed roundabout errors and waterways that are crossing. And waterways are usually at one plane, so if 2 waterways are crossing and are not connected, that's almost always an error, but again, something that a human being should be looking at. So I want to talk a little bit about the future of MapRoulette in the next 3 months and the next 12 months. In the next 3 months, really, our focus is on getting more challenges. Our community is is working very hard to solve the problems that we're giving them. So we want to give them more tasks, more challenges to work on. And we want to give them better statistics. We want to let the community know how they're doing. Are certain challenges more popular than others? How fast are we going, etc. We want to make challenge selection easier. Right now, it's just a list. But we want to make that a little more customized so that you can say, oh, I really like challenges from this area, I really like challenges from that area, etc. So we want to make some architectural improvements. In the next 12 months, we want to do a whole lot of things like localized task selection, so tasks from your area. I want to do some internationalization, translation. That's a big feature that's been asked for a lot here. We want to prevent new types of challenges and make it easier to maintain. The biggest thing we want to add is that you no longer will need to fire up an external editor. And that's really the big feature that we want to introduce in the next year. So, contribute. Please contribute. Come to Martine's workshop once again. Help us code this project. It's written in Python and JavaScript, which I'll talk a little bit about in a second, or help us document. Anything. We can use your help. Yeah, we've done that. Okay, so MapRoulette Technologies. Just because we're a lot of geeks here, they'd like to know what this is written in. It's written in Python. We use Flask. We use GLAlchemy, and we're going to be using Celery soon. We use PostGIS as a data store. We're going to soon be using Redis for some intermediate data and caching. We use Nginx in the front end. We use JavaScript, of course, for all the front end work with jQuery. We use React.js, which has really been helpful in creating these beautiful user interfaces. We use Node for notifications and Moment. I think that we got that. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you all, and I'm open to questions.
Hi, Serge. Thank you for your talk. I have one non-nerdy question. Do you have any behavioral stats on how MapRoulette is actually used? Because I'm probably very atypical, but in general, I'm an average mapper. I find that I will do 2-3 challenges, and then I'll find, for example, ways moving. Then I'll find this area which is so dreadful that I'll spend the next 10 hours working on it. So do you have run lengths or something like that?
Yeah, we're working on improving our metric collection. We have just a little bit of metric collection, and we want to be, that's something that we're very interested in. We've also heard other people say the same thing, which is that they start working on an area, they load it up in their editor, and they start fixing everything in that area. I think that once we move to editor-less challenges, where you'll just have a few buttons, that's going to go away. But I think that's one of the boons, too, is that you get exposed to places that you might not normally look. So,
what about quality assurance? So do you also have some, several people fix the same problem, majority choice or something like that?
So the question was, do we have any way of voting for the right answer? And our current technique is that we just fire up an external editor. So you're going to get the data from OSM and you're going to be contributing directly. In the future, when we have these simple challenges where you just press a button for the answer that you want, I think then we're going to get into these questions of, well, is it the first one who makes the decision, or do we want to have voting? So I think that's a good question that we're going to be addressing in the longer term. Okay, that's it.
Can you talk a little bit about who are the players and what's their like? How do you attract so many players? And imagine if we expanded to a new country, what would be the techniques to motivate lots of players to come on board quickly? Or how do you manage the community of players?
Sure. So I want to make one distinction, which is that one of the differences between MapRoulette and say Court is that we don't have any scoring system currently. We don't have any leaderboards currently. And that's a conscious decision because we want people to be encouraged intrinsically, and we are concerned that giving people scores will help them to focus on their score and not necessarily on data quality. So right now, we call our users or contributors and not players. As for introducing it to a new area, because we currently don't support translation, it's only in English-speaking countries or people that want to put a non-English speaking challenge, in the English-speaking interface. But from a technical standpoint, there's nothing that needs to be done. It's the user who creates the challenge that worries about that. We do support linking directly to a specific challenge, so you'll be able to post on your blog or Twitter or whatever, hey, come and fix this. And we really leave it up to the challenge authors to do that kind of outreach.
As a challenge author, do you just submit like a formula for the challenge, or do you have to submit the pre-processed challenge data? It's
a great question. So so basically the question is, do we offer like a script, or do you have to actually offer the full data for the task? The answer is that I'll give you the technical answer. The problem is that OpenStreetMap is represented in several different ways on different database schemas that each have their different features, right? So we have some database schemas that are really focused on geometry but don't have all the tags. We have other ones that have all the tags but make it really hard to query geometry and angles. So what we do is we punt. We don't do the querying. You do the querying and you submit the task in a form that we know how to consume. And we're discussing whether or not that we can offer maybe a feature where we can do some of that querying, but as long as the different formats are so different and complicated and we can't know what you're going to query, we would prefer to sort of keep that process on your end where you know what you're looking for.
We still have 2 minutes if you want to have.
Talking about challenges and scoring, I know that now is from Telenav is a competition that is using MapRoulette for adding and smoothing ways in the US. There will be more like this, or how is gonna? So
the question was basically Telenav is using MapRoulette to determine contest winners essentially. I don't work for Telenav. So, and I don't know what their plans are regarding that. We do support that, but we don't support direct scoring. So you don't really know, you're not in direct competition. And again, I'm not a Telenav employee, so if I say the wrong thing, maybe a Telenav employee will come up and jump me and stop me. But I think that their idea is the same as ours, which is that we encourage people to do the best mapping, and they want to encourage that without giving you direct incentive to do more bad mapping, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.